Wait, this guy's usually a Miami hater, but he's got the Hurricanes in his top 10. Why?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. I'm Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. On this episode, we'll answer a question about continuity on the offensive coaching staff versus Cam Ward. We'll explain. We have, courtesy of FanDuel and all the great folks out there in Las Vegas, Miami's over-under for wins in 2025. What's the expectation for the Hurricanes football team? But speaking of expectations, a college football analyst, former college football player who doesn't have any love for Miami, at least not usually. We kind of refer to this guy as sometimes coming off as a hater. Joel Klatt from Fox Sports, Joel Klatt Show. He put out his way too early top 25. A lot of media outlets are putting out way too early because we're like, what are we, 8-9 months away from the next season starting? But he's got the Miami Hurricanes inside his top 10. Joel Klatt has Miami at number 8 and is way too early. I'll be honest with you. When I saw Klatt was putting one of these out, I'm like, oh, great. Miami's going to be like number 75 or not going to be anywhere near sniffing that top 25. But he's got Miami at number 8. He believes in Carson Beck. He says Miami has dipped into the same playbook as last year. On the Joel Klatt Show, he said this. They've gone and added a seriously experienced quarterback in Carson Beck, and he's going to try and replicate what Cam Ward was able to do. Is he going to be as good as Cam Ward? I don't know, said Klatt. Ward was sensational in so many ways, but is Beck going to be a really good option? Yes. Carson Beck, of course, we remember in 2023, he threw for just under 4,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, completed 72.4% of his passes. And for reasons that I think were not all in Beck's control, his numbers did dip a little bit in 2024, where he threw for 3,485 yards, which is still really good, almost 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns, which was actually more he threw the previous year, but 12 interceptions. He doubled his interception total, completed about 65% of his passes. But Joel Klatt, like me, says that dip was not really Carson Beck's fault. I felt like it was not completely his fault, he said. The skill position group at Georgia led the country in drops. As a quarterback, what are you supposed to do? Put handles on the ball? Is this play going to improve? Probably. He's not going to have to force it as much as he did, and he's going to play behind one of the better offensive lines in the country. And yes, one of the best-kept secrets from last year was Georgia's offensive line was not good. Miami's offensive line was and is really good because they're returning 4 out of 5 starters from last season, and I think James Brockermeyer, the new center, should be very good at Miami. You know, Zach Carpenter did an admirable job last year. I don't think Miami's going to skip a beat with Brockermeyer this year. And Klatt was also complimentary of Miami's new defensive coordinator. We call the Minnesota Miracle Man. He has unseated Gordon Bombay from the Mighty Ducks. You know what? Gordon Bombay, great as he was, not a real person. Corey Heatherman, he's real and he's spectacular. This is what Klatt said about Heatherman. I have liked Corey Heatherman a lot. I know he hasn't been at the top of college football yet, but I will tell you what, Minnesota has been a very good defense for a long time, and Corey Heatherman has been one of those guys, along with Joe Rossi, that has built that defense and did an excellent job for PJ Fleck. They've hit the portal to address their concerns on defense by adding some players in the secondary, he said, of Miami, which they needed, and Ruben Bain can be a force, but he was banged up in 2025. Okay, so for reference, here are the other teams that Klatt has in his way too early top 10. He's a Fox guy, so he's very partial to the Big Ten, of course, but and he's got a Big Ten team at number one, not the one you think. Penn State, Nittany Lions at number one. I almost feel like maybe with him having Penn State at number one, I kind of question his pick of Miami at number 8. Drew Aller leading the number one team in the country. I mean, Penn State does, return a lot of talent from last year, although they lose their stud tight end, though. He's got Penn State at number 1, Texas, the Arch Manning version of the Longhorns at number 2, Ohio State at number 3. Remember, Ohio State just lost their offensive and defensive coordinators. They just replaced Chip Kelly, their offensive coordinator, with Brian Hartline. They elevated him. He's got Georgia at number 4, Oregon at 5, Notre Dame 6, Clemson 7, Miami 8, LSU 9, and Michigan 10. And here's where some of the other way too early rankings in the country have your Miami Hurricanes heading into the 2025 season. Now, the common thread here, at the very least, everybody's got Miami inside their top 25. Some have Miami higher than others, right? So we mentioned Klatt at Fox Sports has the Hurricanes at number 8. ESPN ranks Miami 23rd, which is probably the worst of these. CBS Sports, Dennis Dodd, like I owe this guy a gift basket. He's got Miami at number 3. Even I am not that bullish on I love my Canes, but number 3 seems a little high heading into the year. NCAA.com has Miami ranked number 11. Pro Football Focus ranks Miami 15th. USA Today ranks Miami 16th. Now, at some point, guys, I'm usually late to the curve when it comes to way too earlys. I am going to put one together, but spoiler alert, I'm probably going to have Miami somewhere between, let's say, 10 to 12 on my way too early. I feel like that's the sweet spot, that I'm not 100% convinced heading into the year that Miami is like a top 10 team, and, really should have been a top 10 team last year, but they weren't able to even finish in the top 12 to get into that college football playoff. But I'm probably going to be somewhere between number 10 to 12. And yeah, listen, when Klatt talks about Miami, he does put a lot of stock in Carson Beck being a really good player and maybe not being a, 1-for-1 replacement for Cam Ward, as in maybe won't be that dynamic, because honestly, who is? I mean, Ward is a number 1 overall draft pick coming up in the next couple of months, but he does believe that Carson Beck can do the job. And, you have to wonder not only how much can Beck elevate Miami's receiving core, but how much can they elevate him? Because there are some wonders that I have, some concerns that I have out there, because, again, you're going to be looking at a receiving core right now, assuming you don't add somebody in the spring, but you probably will. There's dynamic players, but not a whole lot of experience there, like Josiah Trader, Nykar, Chance Robinson. Now, you did bring in C.J. Daniels from LSU with a ton of experience, and I really like what Miami's tight end rotation could look like. We'll talk more about that with one of our upcoming topics on this episode. But listen, I mean, something you have to remember about Carson Beck. Couple things. Number 1, let's try not to compare him directly to Cam Ward on everything, because that's unfair to anybody, and these are two completely different quarterbacks, right? The other part of it with Carson Beck is, let's remember, this guy, had he declared for the NFL draft this year, well, he temporarily did. Had he stuck with that declaration, Carson Beck would be drafted. Like, this is a future NFL quarterback who, much like Cam Ward, a year ago at this time, or a little over a year ago, Ward was getting day 3 NFL draft grades, gambled on himself, came to Miami, improved his stock to first round, probably number 1 overall. Carson Beck comes here in a similar situation, probably a day 3 draft grade, has an opportunity to come to Miami, play behind a superior offensive line, and hopefully offensive skill position talent that's more than good enough for him to elevate them, and vice versa, that he can raise his draft stock the same way that Cam Ward did. But this guy, Carson Beck, had he gone to the NFL this year, in a couple of months, he would be drafted, but he's here at Miami instead. We have a lot more to talk about on this episode, folks, of Locked On Canes. How about this? FanDuel has your over-under on Miami wins for next year you might want to lock this in now, because if Miami does make additions in the spring transfer portal, this number could go up. You want to keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. Oh, guys, I'm going to have my Prize Picks app open all day on Sunday, my friends. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You just pick more or less on at least two players' projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Guys, it's so easy. It takes me less than 60 seconds to make my selections, and it's fun. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard for that selection to hit. Pair that with one or more other correct picks, and you're cashing out. This week, I'm looking at the board. I'm selecting more for Travis Kelce on receiving yards, probably more for Saquon Barkley's rushing yards. And what I love the most, fast, safe withdrawals, because when I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. Check the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege at Prize Picks to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I, our latest topic on Locked On ACC was coaches, football coaches who are on the hot seat and who can get onto the hot seat. And our pal Mike Norvell up there in Tallahassee, he was the headliner. 2 wins last year. Does he need at least 7 wins to keep himself secure up there this year in Tallahassee? Hopefully one of those 7 wins is not against Miami, because Miami does have to go to Florida State in October. Their opportunity at a revenge game, Miami beat that awful. I mean, it felt like, it was like mercy that we didn't beat those guys by more than we did last year. But Florida State's going to try for revenge. And I will make this bold prediction. If Miami doesn't beat Florida State this year, because Florida State should be better, but they shouldn't be great this year. If you don't win that game, you're probably not cashing in over 8.5 wins. That's Miami's number. FanDuel has released over-under win totals for a handful of ACC teams. Only certain over-unders have been revealed yet, only 4 from the ACC. But the Miami Hurricanes, their win total, according to the sports books for next year, is 8.5. So if you think Miami's going to win 9 or more games, go to FanDuel.com, you smash the over. If you think Miami's going to take a step back this year, because you were such a believer in Cam Ward, you don't think Beck can replicate that, and you think the schedule so much tougher, the schedule this year, you want to take that under 8.5 wins. So that's what we're looking at right now for Miami. So Clemson leads the ACC with those that have been revealed so far, and I think Clemson will be at the top of the ACC because that's everyone's pick to win the conference more than likely next year. Clemson leads the ACC with a 9.5 over-under. Miami and Louisville are both at 8.5 wins. And then Bill Belichick's North Carolina Tar Heels, 7.5. That one seems high. That was one of the things that Kenton and I were looking at Locked On ACC. Seems very high to me. So Miami's 8.5 over-under. That's actually a game down from what it was last year. Last year, Miami's win total was 9.5. The Hurricanes did go over that. I can understand why, despite the fact that I like to think that Miami, even if you no longer have Cam Ward at quarterback, which is a big loss, and I get it. But I think Miami can make their overall team, let's hope, more balanced than it was last year with what they've added on the defensive side of the football. We've added 5 defensive backs already through the transfer portal, a defensive tackle. We could still add maybe more defensive players through the portal before it's all said and done. And a defensive lineman and David Blay. Miami obviously has a really good offensive line. So if they want to have more of a balanced offense, a little bit less reliant on the pass this coming season, a little bit more reliant on your O-line opening up holes for Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle, who I think are a dynamic running back rotation. Like, I see no reason why Miami can't like contend for an ACC championship this year. But I understand the 8.5 over under because Miami's schedule in conference and non-conference is considerably tougher than it was a season ago. You know, you have home game against Notre Dame, national runners-up, who are probably going to be, I would imagine, favored against Miami in that opening game, even in South Florida, to open up the season. You've got, you know, what seems like an ascending Florida Gators team at home in week 4, and a tricky ACC schedule where, listen, you can only make it so tough, like in conference, but you know, Miami obviously tends to slip on the banana peel for a lot of ACC games historically, and you've got to end your season on the road in potential bad weather spots late November in Blacksburg, and then Thanksgiving weekend in Pittsburgh to wrap up your season. So it's not an easy schedule. So the 8.5 number, I think, makes total sense to me. I mean, when I make my win prediction for next season, I'm probably going to be in the 9-win range, maybe very optimistically at 10 if I decide to be really, really bullish. But I think 8.5 is a good number from FanDuel, and that's kind of what I expected it to be at. So I think the number's so good. In fact, I don't see a whole lot of value in it. I'm probably going to not play that for Miami. I may play under 7.5 for North Carolina because I think they're putting a lot of stock in Belichick just like waving a magic wand on that roster in one season. Now, in order for Miami to win 9 or more games this year, and you can smash your over ticket this season, here's the 3 factors that I find to be more important. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm leaving something out. Number 1, in order for Miami to go over 8.5, they need to beat at least one of Notre Dame and Florida in the first month of the season. I think you need to win at least one of those games. If you lose both of those games, I think you can kiss your over ticket goodbye because you're probably going to slip up somewhere a couple times in the ACC schedule if that's the case. So I think you need to beat at least one of Notre Dame or Florida. Number 2, Carson Beck needs to be healthy coming into the season. I believe he will be. He's on schedule, if not ahead of schedule, with his recovery from elbow surgery, and he needs to, of course, stay healthy during the season. And yeah, number 3, the defensive secondary, really the entire defense, but especially the secondary, needs to be fixed because Cam Ward was able to cover up a lot of your warts last year just by going out there and putting up 40, 50 points at will when your defense couldn't stop anybody. As much as I love Carson Beck, I don't want to put that much on his plate this year. So the defense has got to be fixed, especially the defensive secondary. And I'm not saying Miami needs to have the number 1 defense in the country, the number 5 defense in the country. We talked about this yesterday. My bold prediction, and I stand by it, is Miami's going to have a top 15 defense in America this year. I see no reason why they won't. With what they've added personnel-wise, with Corey Heatherman's philosophy and his history, he had Minnesota at top 10 in every defensive category last year. I see no reason why Miami can't have a top 15 defense. And if they do that, I believe the offense will be good enough. And, Miami can go over that 8.5 win total. But those are the things that need to happen. We'll answer some of you guys' questions when we come back. So I like this one. We got this question from our guy BP, because we're all very, very happy that Miami's keeping the band together with the offensive coaching staff. Shannon Dawson, he's coming back. He's not going to Ohio State. It looks like Kevin Beard is staying. I know that there were some rumors about maybe an NFL job for him, but it looks like Coach KB is back. Obviously, Alex Mirabal is back. Like, continuity versus Cam Ward. Like, how much did Cam Ward elevate that staff last year? You want to keep it locked, my friends. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. I'm certainly not done yet with FanDuel. Guys, I mean, if you want to smash that win total, you got Miami over 8.5 wins this year. And of course, Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, yeah, you can do that. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Guys, I bet on the length of the national anthem every single year. First touchdown scorer, I like Saquon Barkley. Anytime touchdown scorer, I like Barkley, and I like Travis Kelce. You know he's going to score it sometime during the game. MVP, Patrick Mahomes. Guys, you need to lock this in. You feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. And the live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. The app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet at FanDuel and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the FanDuel app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we get this question from our guy BP, who says, hey, continuity versus Cam. It's like the title of an essay. Continuity versus Cam Ward. He says, does the value of keeping the entire number one offensive coaching staff intact, having to replace Cam Ward, does that outweigh Ward making them look better than they actually are? BP, I sensed some seeds of doubt in Miami's offensive coaching staff. I believe in Miami's offensive coaching staff, and I believed in them even before Ward got there. Now, having the number one offense in the country, folks, I would venture to guess that you go year by year. Whoever has the number one offense in the country probably has a pretty spectacular quarterback leading that, right? It's not like you can't just say, man, these coaches are such wizards that they had CFL caliber quarterbacks, but man, this coach is such a genius. They elevated these guys to stardom. Guys, talent elevating coaching is a tale as old as time. And let's also remember that, coaching does bring in the talent. They've got to go out there and recruit these guys. Now, in the case of Cam Ward, this obviously wasn't a guy that Miami recruited out of high school, but, they did have to convince him to come play in this offense. This is a good fit for you. You can improve your stock here. So you have to give coaching credit for getting Cam Ward here in the first place. And let's not forget, as good as Cam Ward is, he had his best career season in this Miami offense with these Miami coaches. They did that with him. And again, I think they helped one another, right? Obviously, having a quarterback that talented made Shannon Dawson's offense, better than it would have been with probably any other quarterback in America. But Ward still had his best career season in this team, in this offense. That's worth something. And listen, Shannon Dawson, I believe, has also proven himself with, previous players that are not named Cam Ward. He worked wonders with Clayton Tune, former Houston quarterback. Tank Dell, stud receiver at Houston, helped put him in all the right situations. Dawson's offense, even before Cam Ward got to Miami, Xavier Restrepo was elevating his numbers in 2023 before Ward got to Miami in 2024. I would say Shannon Dawson's offense is an excellent marriage of air raid principles with adaptations to accommodate other systems like a power running game. I think he's probably the most adaptable air raid guy that I've seen, because usually those that come from that Mike Leach, Hal Mummy coaching tree are not nearly as adaptable as Shannon Dawson is. And I think it's a very player-friendly offense. I think playmakers like to play in Dawson's offense. So, listen, and I understand what you're saying. It's like, are we putting too much stock into Miami's offensive staff because Cam Ward is the ultimate equalizer and the ultimate Band-Aid? I get your question. I just don't agree with it, because they still had to elevate Ward to the best season he's had in college to raise his draft stock from 4th or 5th round to 1st round, number 1 overall. And so, listen, I think the moral of the story here is, when you don't have Cam Ward as your quarterback, you're probably not going to have the number 1 offense in the country every year. But I do think this offense can be really good, and I think Carson Beck can thrive in it. And in terms of the continuity part, because I feel like maybe I'm drifting a little bit away from the spirit of your question. In terms of the continuity part, I value that. And I think the fact that we've got, from Cody Woodall to Alex Mirabal, Kevin Beard, Shannon Dawson, who's the quarterback's coach and the offensive coordinator, I think to have that group entirely intact and back for this coming season, I think that's really important because I think continuity is part of what a head coach needs to succeed, to have the staff under him as consistent and as effective as possible. And, Kevin Beard, he made his bones as a top position coach and recruiter long before he met Cam Ward, okay? We get this question from 818 who says, hey, what does Mario need to improve on as a coach for the team to become the team that we all want it to be, national title contenders, he says. And what has he done well so far in 3 years since he's been head coach outside of recruiting players? I know a lot of people will bring up like, hey, you got to tighten up all the clock management, late game stuff. I get that. I also think the most important thing is to really find and cultivate the right mix of assistants. And that's why, going back to the previous question about continuity on offense, I would like to find that on defense as well. Like, I really hope that Corey Heatherman and the staff that he's putting together can stick here for 3-4 years, right? Like, I think continuity and finding the right mix is important because, Cristobal is on, what will this be, his third defensive coordinator in 4 years. So I think finding and cultivating the right group of assistants and coordinators is really, really important. As far as what Cristobal's done really well, I think an underrated part of Cristobal's evolution at Miami is that the evolution. I know that in previous stops of his, people, they tried to give him this reputation, whether it was fair or unfair, as, hey, this guy is a little hard-headed, he's kind of stuck in his ways, he's not going to adapt. Well, I've seen Mario adapt and adopt an air raid tree offensive coordinator, and it seems like Mario is making a lot of adaptations and sacrifices, bringing in someone to help him with the late game analytics and time management situations. Like, I actually see Mario, it looks like he's willing to do whatever he can to try to adapt, evolve, and win at his alma mater. So I give him a lot of credit for that, no doubt. We get this one from Jackson from Delray, who says, Donno, when you did your players to watch in spring, you didn't say Elijah Lofton. Why? I think he's going to be a guy that takes one of the biggest steps forward this year. You know what? You're right. I gave you guys my list of five veterans, returning veterans, 5 ascending young players, which is that's the category I could have put Elijah Lofton in, 5 true freshmen, 5 transfers. And listen, there's a lot of names I mentioned. Elijah Lofton was not one of them. I probably could and should have mentioned him. I mean, folks, and obviously Carson Beck using his tight ends historically. I mean, not to compare the players, of course, but, Brock Bowers was a really featured part of the Georgia offense in 2023. Carson Beck likes to have him some reliable tight ends. And so, yeah, I think Lofton, who had some, good cameo appearances as a true freshman this past year, we know about his versatility. It's a big thing. You can line that guy up anywhere. I agree. I think Elijah Lofton in his second year at a Bishop Gorman High School powerhouse program in Las Vegas, I think Lofton can blow up this season. So forgive me for not mentioning him. And I knew when I gave you my list of 20 players, 4 different categories, I knew people would bring up some really good ones that I neglected to mention. Elijah Lofton is probably right up there, right up at the top of that list, man. I appreciate you guys so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Be on the lookout because there's some questions I've answered already, some questions you guys have given me that I haven't. I'm going to be answering more questions in written form on my canescounty.com mailbag that should be coming out later on today, Friday. So keep your eyes out for that at canescounty.com. Make sure you smash the like button and subscribe. And I will talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.